we all need a little bit of anxiety in our lives, right? So anxiety really is a bit necessary to get us to the next developmental phase, to get us to be motivated, to get us to have goals and work towards it. Otherwise, we would all sort of sit around and not care much or not be driven by anything. So a little bit of it is good. It gets us to reach our targets and our goals and our achievements. But when it starts interfering with our day-to-day functioning, when it starts presenting itself as a barrier where we can no longer reach our goals, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's when it really does require some help in managing it. So that is all fine and well when I'm speaking to a room full of adults, because we all have some kind of a coping strategy, and some strategies work better than others. We're just going to start off with you just answering a few questions for yourselves. Maybe make a little note if you have a pencil or paper available to you, or just make a mental note here. I would like you to think of a time when stress or anxiety interfered with your life and what you found that helped you in that time. Okay. Then could you think about the things that you have already done that have worked well, and add that to your list, because I would like you to keep doing those things that have been working for you in managing it. So maybe just give that a little thought and write that down. Now, so before we move on to that, have we all got that down? Have a little picture of that in our mind. And I want to just explain the concept that I'm going to explain later on how to use it with children, but just do a little exercise with you now, which is called externalizing. I want you to answer these questions for me, please, for yourselves. Number one, how did you become anxious? And what are you most anxious about when you think about your day-to-day or just life in general? Which of your current qualities come from being anxious? Okay, so how did you become anxious? What is the thing that makes you most anxious? And which one of your current qualities come from being anxious? And this is about you now, not about your child. How does it feel? And when you think about it in this way, how does the future look? Okay, just keep that in mind. And now we're going to change it a little bit. Okay, we're going to change anxious from an adjective that's describing you to a noun, anxiety. So we're no longer using it as an adjective. In what context is anxiety most likely to take over? Okay, answer that for yourself. So now we're changing the questions a little bit. What has anxiety gotten you to do that is against your better judgment? And have there been times that you can get the best of anxiety? So instead of it getting the best of you, you're getting the best of it. And times when anxiety could have taken over, but you managed to keep it out of the picture. Now we're going to reflect a little bit. Okay, now that we're looking at it differently, we're seeing it as a noun and not as something that's describing you, but rather as a thing that is there. How do you feel now? What seems possible in regards to anxiety? How does the future look in regard to anxiety? And how is your experience with anxious different to anxiety? Okay. And how was it useful? So if you are willing to share, just with that little experiment, just answering those questions worded a bit differently and viewing anxious and anxiety differently, what would you be willing to share? Anyone? You could maybe type it in the chat, and maybe Patrick could share with us. Patrick, do we have anything?
Sleep lost starting a new job.
Okay. And when you're looking at it differently, when instead of it looking at it as anxious being an adjective describing you, rather looking at it as anxiety, that is something that is outside of you.
Yeah. Somebody mentioned that feeling anxious is an emotion, whereas anxiety feels like a passing thought.
There we go. That's a very
Uh,
nice way of putting it.
Anxious feels personal. Anxiety is something that happens to me.
Exactly. And that is exact. If anything else comes out that you feel like you need to mention, Patrick, you can just interrupt
Yep.
me. But that's exactly it. So the point of the whole exercise and externalizing is that to see yourself and anxiety as two separate things and not as one, right? So it's, you have more control over it, right? And that is what is impactful when we're dealing with managing anxiety or chasing away worry with our little ones or teenagers and adults, really all alike. So what are my best hopes for you today is that for you to gain a little bit more information, to add a little bit to your list that you wrote right at the beginning about what has worked previously in managing anxiety for yourself. And hopefully this talk is useful in that it can give you some extra ideas, some added thought in how to manage those situations that can become very overwhelming. And one last thing I would like you to do is one little quick scaling exercise where from scale of 1 to 10, 10 is that you feel like you're an expert at dealing with your child's worries, and 0 is the complete opposite. If you could, for yourself, just plot where you feel you're at right now. And just keep that in mind and then have a look and see where you feel like you might be at by the end of the talk. Hopefully there's a shift. Maybe there isn't, but let's see. Okay, we've already spoken about that. We're first going to just go over, as we all know, I'm just going to quickly go through, I'm just going to put it up there and then I'll talk through it, in how anxiety may manifest itself in children. And often it looks very different than it does in adults. So we approach it with an adult brain, and we need to kind of have our eagle eyes out in spotting it, how it may present in children. The most common form that we all know, and as parents and caregivers, is the somatic symptoms that present itself, which can have an array of different forms, such as nausea, tummy problems is very, very common, muscular pain, even chronic fatigue is one of them that we often see in our teenagers, that's over and above the usual teenage need to sleep in and extra rest. What we can see often is what appears to be oppositional type behavior. So often referrals come in a form of, the child is oppositional, doesn't cooperate, has lots of learning difficulties. And when the learning difficulty referrals kind of come through, we need to scratch very carefully of, is it a real learning difficulty, or is it anxiety that's playing a more significant role? And that can be quite tricky to distinguish. And sometimes there's a comorbidity that exists. It can present itself with children in terms of panic, whether it is performance anxiety in terms of tests and exams, or in terms of panicking when you have to interact in a social situation. Often parents report where children are excited about a birthday party, but when they arrive to the birthday party, then they kind of become overwhelmed with nerves and have a difficult time integrating and need some help and coaching. Aggressive outbursts. And that can range. I want to say to you that it's just in young children who don't have the vocabulary to express themselves, or the words, or the cognitive understanding to feel what they're, not to feel, to express what they are processing. But we also see it in teenagers and, and older children, where they can become so overwhelmed with this feeling of anxiety that at first even they might not distinguish it as anxiety, but it's just all these emotions are happening at once that it turns out to be an aggressive outburst. And that can be quite scary for loved ones that are, and bystanders that are looking at this. And it's easy to jump to the conclusion, and almost in a way safe, to say, they're just very aggressive. They need to learn to manage their anger. But when we scratch a little deeper and we have a bit of a conversation, it's often the root is anxiety. So low concentration and short-term memory. Us as adults, just think about ourselves when we are under stress, when something traumatic happens in our lives and we're feeling more anxious than usual, whether it's finance related, family related. Our working memory is not quite as effective and as efficient. We can become quite forgetful. Our concentration can be depleted, and And so when those sort of things happen, many of the symptoms present themselves that very similar to ADHD, especially the inattentive type. So again, that's another area that we need to be quite careful when we want to jump to conclusions to say, you know, my child just has difficult concentrating, only if they would focus, you know, they just can't remember anything. I think they have ADHD. Or a teacher, if you're an educator, the child might present in that way, but often it isn't, and it is anxiety. And again, though, these two can coexist. There can be a comorbidity between the two. So careful consultation with mental health professionals and family doctors is really important, and pediatricians, to get to the bottom of that. So the list can continue, right? So I'm going to just run through a few more. And some of the most common ones are things like task avoidance. So if I'm finding a task anxiety provoking, if I have a feeling that I might not be good at something, then I rather avoid doing it than do it and fail. That is a very common thing that we see with children. Tearfulness over and above what is really necessary for the situation, where and often see this with my own children, where they get anxious about getting into trouble when the one has done something and the other one has done something, and they're wanting to tell you the story. And as they're talking through it, I don't know if you've noticed, they kind of start processing that, oh, actually I was at fault. Oh, maybe I'm not so innocent. So their anxiety peaks, not because they have an anxiety disorder, because they come to a realization. And their tears start filling up while they're trying to defend themselves. And you realize it's actually anxiety that's come up, and that tearfulness, if you're not calm to receive the information, you're kind of thinking, why are you crying? You're the one that did something wrong. But it's their realization of what's happening as they're speaking through it. So that's just one example. Often we see with teenagers too, and adults, I don't think this is ageist at all, in terms of falling asleep or staying asleep, right? So if we have difficulty with anxiety, if we have things that have elevated our levels of anxiety, then sleeping and staying asleep is quite difficult. Then you have some of the typical, the typical symptoms and signs that we see as parents, like biting nails or children pulling their hair out. But then again, I want to caution you, every time a child bites their nails doesn't mean that they suffer from anxiety. Sometimes it's a learned habit that they have that they need to break, and other times it truly is when their anxiety is elevated, that their fingernails might go in their mouths, or pulling the hair is usually one sign and symptom of anxiety too. But then, to be fair, I know, like a member of my own family, when they're concentrating, they play with their eyebrows, and they're constantly pulling their eyebrows out. And if we're not aware enough, what my point is, like, we have to be careful to see all of this within context, right? Because sometimes it's just a habit or a way of modulating and controlling your concentration rather than soothing yourself from anxiety, right? So we do need to be careful in terms of seeing all of this within context. One very and this is another one that we need to see in context, and I've seen a lot of parents be quite frustrated with this one, where the behavior at home and at school are vastly different. Again, this is not always the case that it's because the child is suffering from anxiety that this is happening. It's also just a child managing themselves in an environment where they feel fully safe and comfortable to express themselves, like a home environment we would typically think is that kind of a scenario, to a school environment where they know a different kind of set of behaviors is expected of them. So a child that might be struggling with anxiety might at school present in two ways, either very needy, needing the teacher to constantly give them reassurance, making sure they are on track, checking in all the time, even though the student is very, very capable of doing the task, but constantly needing that reassurance. Where at home, they're quite confident and independent and continue with their task. In fact, wanting parents to be hands-off, but they feel safe in that home environment. Other times we find that anxious children actually at school look like they really keep it together. They really know how to just cope through that day and have that poker face on and go. But the minute they arrive home, there's a meltdown, not necessarily a tantrum, but just, all guards are down, and just the slightest thing can set them off or make them very tearful or very emotional. So we need to be, that communication between home and school is so important. And then there's another situation where a child is just very aware on how they want to present themselves in different environments. I would give my own child as an example. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I had, when there's the student-led conferences, and off I toodle off and I meet with my daughter's math teacher. And the way I was describing my daughter at home, I could see the teacher's eyes were kind of popping out of her head. And my description was, my child is like a Tasmanian devil. And she was describing her as, but she's so meek, mild, and quiet. Sometimes she gets chatty, but no, she's very calm. And there I am going, and there she is kind of wondering, what? And do I think my child suffers from anxiety? Not anything over and above what she should for her age and for the task that she has. But does she want to be perceived differently in the different environments? Absolutely. So again, just to be mindful of that is quite important. And yeah, so I think we've kind of covered all of those. So why are we all here today? Because we're hoping to find some magic wand and solution to having an anxiety-free child. There is no such thing as an anxiety-free child. I think that's an unattainable goal, because children are human and all humans experience anxiety, right? Because we need it. We need it to move forward. We need it to achieve in small, manageable, healthy doses. Okay, it drives us to the next developmental phase. And to want to eliminate anxiety is an unrealistic goal. What we can do and what we can start off with is us as caregivers and the adults in our children's lives need to learn to manage our anxiety. And then we can also once we can manage our anxiety, at least to a certain extent, we can't eliminate it, then we can step in and help our children manage their anxiety in little bite-sized pieces, right? So, and what our perception of something is, a situation that's anxiety provoking, and what their perception is very different. And just to take a moment and put it into perspective to be able to manage that. That's really the key of what we're trying to achieve. Do we have any questions so far or anything like that? Are we good to carry on?
Nothing yet. Just had one person comment on biting nails, perfection, and anxiety. So somewhere along the way, we might address that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Perfectionism and anxiety sometimes do kind of go hand in hand. That needs to be perfect, but I think we might just touch on it on the next slide a little bit. And then if there's more questions, just please feel free. So I called this slide developmental anxiety because of my comments constantly around how anxiety helps us get to the next developmental phase, right? So so when you read the books and the theory, and this is just kind of a loose guideline, so I haven't taken one specific person theory to put in here, but generally when you go through the literature, there's the specific timelines where anxiety will peak, and this is natural and normal and gets the child moving in the right direction. So between birth and 18 months, we look at attachment, right? The need to attach to the primary caregiver versus anxious attachment. Now, often when parents see this and they think, oh, my child must have anxious attachment, I'm a terrible mother or I'm a terrible father, that's not necessarily the case. Often there is, factors outside of your control that may cause this, or just the nature in which the environment that you're in and the circumstances you have to deal with, being a first-time parent. There's just so many things, right? So going to that route around like, I must be a terrible parent is just not a helpful way to approach or think about it at all. So this is where a child feels they're able to count on the primary caregiver to be there for the basic needs, and that consistency is important. And when is it in childhood that consistency is not important, right? We always refer to being consistent with our boundaries, being consistent with our rules, being consistent with the flexibility that we show within our boundaries that we might put into place for our families and our children. between 18 to 36 months, that's when the child becomes more brave and wants to explore the world and wants to go outside. They want to, this is where our hearts as parents kind of skip a beat, especially if it's our first child, because we don't want them to hurt themselves. God forbid they get a bruise. What if they cry? Be careful are the words that come out of our mouth, out of love and protection, right? If we could, we want to kind of wrap them in bubble wrap and send them out to make sure that they're okay. But it's the worst thing. So I learned this not the hard way. Actually, I think I learned it in a way that I didn't expect to learn it. So I was the typical mom, right? No, be careful, don't do that. You're going to fall. No, go catch them just before they fall. And my husband, who is a thrill seeker, and does mountain biking and all the things that I think will eventually kill you and would like to stay away from, he stopped me and he said, you know what? She needs to learn to fall. If she doesn't learn to fall, then she's going to break something. But if we teach her how to fall, then she'll be fine. Yes, she'll get a bruise. Yes, she'll get a cut and she'll cry, but she won't break. We're going to actually save her life by teaching her how to fall. And I'm forever, I'll think of that on a daily basis, especially when I had a son, and he's more of a daredevil than his sister, and he goes off to do things. And my thing is like, be careful. Okay, never mind. Just watch how you fall. Make sure you tuck and roll. So my instructions become different, right? So, and that is what we're talking about there, allowing them to explore and teaching them the skills on how to fall and get up again, because that's the basics of your resiliency. It's okay if you fall. We don't want to be perfect. We want to learn how to recover. So we're not fearful of our environment and what might go wrong. 36 to 48 months, that's when they need to define themselves versus the false self. And what I mean by that is really being a people pleaser, or actually figuring out what I like and what I don't like, and where am I going to be assertive about those things. And it starts from a really, really young age. And we see it again, kind of rearing its head in adolescence, really more, hopefully kind of with more power and strength, right? This is what I like and this is what I don't. And our job really is to guide, right? So to deny them the ability to experiment within reason and to figure out what they like and what they don't with certain behaviors. That's where our role comes in, right? To try guide them in a very effective and understanding manner. My daughter is now just turned 10, and I often find her coming in and speaking in a different way and having these mannerisms that some of them make me cringe. Some of them make me want to laugh, and some of them I just don't understand. And so I often say to her, I think you're trying to experiment. I think you're experimenting with something. You've been to so-and-so's house, or you've been watching this program, because that's where they get it from, right? From their peers, from watching other people, from watching us. And it's my job then to say, that suits you because of this. This is kind of maybe not quite as appropriate or as pleasing as you think it might be because of that, and giving them reasonable answers of why, but letting them know that I notice that you're trying to experiment, and that's okay. And this is why it's great, and this is why it's not. But keep experimenting, and then you'll find what you like and what fits well with you. And then as they get older, 4.5 to 6.5 years old, we see that competitiveness kind of coming out a little bit. They need to achieve, they want to do well. They want you to recognize that they're doing well. And this is where we want to encourage, not giving empty praise. And that's what I always say to my clients, like, be very careful about giving empty praise of, well done, my darling, that was great, rather than giving evidence-based praise, right? Like, I can see you tried so hard in that, or you're gonna get there, keep going. Maybe, you need to balance a little bit more on the right than the left if they're trying to like learn how to skateboard or something like that. But giving them feedback where you're acknowledging the efforts and you're acknowledging their achievements, but at the same time, you're not giving them empty praise, because they see right through it, right? And then they don't believe you. And as they get older again, this is when they, mommy, daddy, look, everything. You have to look all the time. That actually starts at a much younger age, but it really peaks at that time as well, because they want to show what they have learned and they want to share what they know. And they love getting your input, right? And your experiences when they're sharing with you. Did you ever experience this? Have you seen your child's face light up when you go, Oh, that's happened to me before. I felt like that before. I did that when I was your age. And the little faces light up because they can relate and they go, oh, so you also did, you perfect being in my eyes, because when they're little, that's what they think. As they grow older, they don't think that so much. But, it's that relating and knowing that they're being heard. Again, going back to that acknowledging what they're doing, and giving them evidence-based praise and acknowledgement just goes a really long way and opens the door for communication too. I hope that's all making sense. Okay, sorry, here we go. So there are factors that are way out of our control, right? That impact and bring on anxiety into our lives and into our children's lives, that can fuck it up. And this is, look, we can go on for days about the different environmental factors, right? The external factors that could impact our level of anxiety. But this is just a couple that just, through working with families, looking at my own family and experiences, that really stand out for me. And I wanted to go through, and of course, as we know, divorce is so prevalent in so many homes, and very often it's a good choice for the family to go down that route. I don't think any family comes to the decision for divorce willy-nilly. It's a very involved process for everyone, and it's a tricky one, right? How do we explain this to our children? How do we manage their anxiety when the entire little world, whether it was turbulent with all 4 of you, 5 of you, 6 of you, or whether it wasn't, where the parents had a good way of keeping it all under wraps, their little world has fallen apart, basically, right? What they know to be normal for them. And our job is to help manage that anxiety in terms of, yes, we both love you. That what we always say, right? Yes, we both love you. That hasn't changed. It's not because of you. Circumstances change, life changes, but actually to be open about the uncertainty of it, because I think we feel often that we need to give certainty in order for anxiety to be diminished, that we then sometimes give certainty where certainty is not due, and because we can't give it, right? Like we're not sure what's going to happen and whether we're going to move or not, for example, right? There's so much uncertainty around change and adjustment like that. We don't know how we as adults are going to be feeling through the adjustment process. Maybe today you're having a strong day, but next week you're not going to, due to a variety of different reasons. So to kind of be, not to overshare, but share enough that the child has some level of closure, right? Has some level of, okay, so this is what we're going through now, and these are the reasons why, and giving them to them in bite-sized pieces, so that they can digest and understand it. Trauma can come in a variety of different shapes and sizes, from illnesses to car accidents to unforeseen events, to loss of a pet. Anything can be experienced in a traumatic way, and that can impact, and that is out of our control, right? Things like moving houses. I know, because we've moved in the past 4 years a couple of times, and until we found our kind of forever home. And before that, I always thought we would have the most stable, we bought our house when we got married, and this is where we're going to have our children, and this is where we're going to die. That's what's going to happen. And life had a different plan for us. And so we had to adjust. So there, for example, my anxiety was way higher than what my children's anxiety was around moving and immigration. So because of that, I noticed, I'm giving them, it's transferring onto them, because I'm struggling to manage it, because I immigrated when I was 10 already from Iran to South Africa. Now I'm doing it to my kids again. I'm like, what's happening here? Why is this happening? I don't want to do this. But the reasons being very different, and actually I did want to do it. So why am I saying I don't want to do it? I need to figure out how to do it so that my children are not going to experience the anxiety I experienced, right? So, and how we did that is just by being very open and honest. Guys, I don't know where the post office is or where the grocery store is. So our first adventure when we arrive is find the nearest grocery store so we don't go hungry, let's figure out where the post office is. You're going to learn how to read what Google Maps is saying to me. I'm going to drive, and we've got to drive on the right side of the road. Okay, this is going to be a challenge, so we turned it into some kind of a game in our home to be able to cope and manage. And learning not to overshare, which is a mistake I made in our first move, right? So Those are things to keep in mind. Simple things where to us might not, especially when they're really young, seem like a big deal, but to kids are things like changing classes from one grade, moving from one grade to another grade, changing schools, not making a team, right? You're trying out for a team and you didn't make it. That can elevate anxiety. And it can very easily turn into where a child feels like I'm not good enough and I haven't worked hard enough, but rather approaching it from an angle of, because what do we do then? We dismiss it, right? We go, no, 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 don't worry. No, of course you are. Of course you've worked hard enough, because we want to fix it. I want to make them better. But how about approaching it from a point of view of, what would you, okay, you didn't make the team. That is very disappointing because you've worked hard. I know you have. You've been practicing, you've been doing all the things you've been doing. But now that you've been through the tryouts, what do you think we need to do differently so you can increase your chances of making the team, right? We can either give up altogether, or we can just try something different. And brainstorming with your child and having the child in the process of brainstorming, right? So I know you don't want to go to a new school. It's always scary changing schools. You've left all your friends behind. The thing is, you haven't lost your friends, though. We need to remember that. Okay, so are we still in touch with your friends? Yes. Is it going to be scary going into a new school? Absolutely it is. What can help make the scary just a little bit less for today, right? Trying to do it one day at a time, as opposed to, it'll be great, you're going to meet new people, your teachers are amazing, it's the best school in town. Rather just managing it one item at a time. And those are just some simple examples. So being open and honest about those changes are really important, and bringing it in at their developmental level so they can understand. And acknowledging the worry not as weakness or as the lack of resilience, but rather that the child is trying to cope. So it's strength within your child. They're trying to cope. That's why they're asking the questions and they're going to what if land, what if. And I always say, what if is great, because it makes you aware of the things you need to think about. But once you've thought about it, what if needs to go away, because it can take over, so that you can then make the plan and move forward, right? We always make a plan. And one thing that actually, this is in a recent book I was reading where this point was highlighted, and I thought I want to share it with you tonight, is describing the emotions and actions that you're observing in your child. So whether your children are kind of fighting with each other, or your child's anxiety levels have elevated and you can see it, just describing what you're seeing can help calm the child so much by feeling acknowledged and heard and understood. And if you're wrong in your observations, they will correct you, because they can see that you're just describing. You're not saying what they should and shouldn't do, but rather, you know what? I'm seeing my 8-year-old boy feeling very sad because he feels like he doesn't belong right now. You've lost your place. You feel like you've lost your place within your group of friends, because your interests are a bit different and their interests are different. You're struggling to find something to talk about, and that's making you feel left out and it's making you feel sad. I feel it sounds like you're trying to find a way to connect with this group of friends. Would that be right? And that's actually a real example that happened the other day, right? Except I hadn't read the book yet, so I didn't approach it that way. I approached it from, there is something wrong. I know there is something wrong. When you're ready, please tell me, because I want to hear about it. And just before bedtime, I heard about it. And then I engaged in this conversation of observing and trying to figure out what it is that he needs, which is reconnecting with this group of friends that he feels disconnected from, and brainstorming around how can we do that. So just describing and acknowledging increases their emotional intelligence too, which then opens up the freedom to communicate way more, right? And also, you're not asking questions when you're describing, so then it's not invasive, it's not threatening, and you have not put any demands on them in that moment where their anxiety is elevated. Okay, and obviously when we manage it carefully, then anxiety subsides and emotional functioning naturally improves when we can bring it down. So now I'm going to tell you on how to chase away worry by externalizing Mr. Worry and the child. Okay, so whether it's my own kids or whether kids come to me for therapy, my first thing to do is I always go, and I know that the root cause is anxiety, or that's the referral. I try to separate anxiety and worry and rename it. Okay, because what do I want to do? I want the child to gain control over the situation. What is anxiety? Partly, we feel like we have a loss of control, right? I have no control. Life is happening to me. School is happening to me. Everything's just happening to me. I have no say. And having the child in a position where they're feeling empowered and feeling like, actually, no, you have a lot of power. Let me remind you, right? So I usually, I keep saying often, but I actually usually just say to the child, you know what, I hear that sometimes, I don't know, Mr. Worry, I just name it myself and the child corrects me if they want to name it something else, like Mr. Worry visits. And when Worry visits, it seems like it takes complete control over your tear ducts. Like if it's a child that just, you know, bursts into tears and can't function at school because they're crying all the time as soon as they feel overwhelmed. And when that happens, then you lose out on all sorts of things. Is that true? Does that happen? And the kids usually tell me, you know what, it's not Mr. Worry, actually. You know, it's a spot of nervous, or it's Miss Scaredy Cat, or it's, you know, they name it, or it's just blah. And they name it whatever they want to name it. But basically, it's something that is external to the child. So again, we're looking at it as a noun, like we did in our exercise at the beginning. And then I go through asking them a series of questions, and we explore it, and I write these things down so that I have a bank of information. So saying things like, so what does Worry tell you when Worry comes? I'm just curious. So when Worry comes and makes it, what does he tell you that, or she tell you, that makes the tear ducts, you know, go out of control? And they'll tell me something like, they tell me that I can't do it. They tell me that it tells me that I'm useless, you know? When is it not there? Because what I want to know and what I want the child to realize is that you're not worried all the time. Worry is not with you all the time. There are times in the day, even if it is just 5 minutes, there are times in the day that you are without worry. So let's figure out when those times are, right? So when is it that it's not there? And the exception, because we want to find the exceptions and the resources. And that is where I pay very, very close attention. And I make a list, whether it's as silly as I have my favorite stuffy with me, you know, something as simple as that, to like, oh, Worry is very scared of mom. When mom is with me, I don't feel worried. Or Worry is not there when I'm with my friends. Or Worry is not there when I have my favorite pencil. I mean, it can really be random depending on what the child feels, when the child feels okay. And we explore those moments. So when is mom with you that there's no worry? What are you guys usually doing? You know, like, are you guys snuggling the whole time? Is that what you do all day long? Or are you doing something with mom? Oh, no, nothing. Mom's just in the room. I'm doing my own thing, you know, which also gives you a lot of information of like, okay, I wonder what it is about mom that Worry is so scared of, right? I wonder what it is about the stuffy that Worry is so scared of. Or often they say to me, when I'm busy having fun, Worry doesn't come. Oh, okay, so Worry is afraid of fun. That's great. So the more fun you're having, the less worry we have. That's great. So we want to keep those resources. And then I ask them, do you think what Worry is telling you is completely true? Does it happen every single time? You know? And often the answer is no. So for example, when we first moved, my son was 4 years old, and he started at a daycare, very wonderful group of people. And they kept telling me, you know, he refuses to go outside during playtime. Now, we come from South Africa. We never spend time inside. We are always outside, right? Because the weather is great. It doesn't rain like it does here. The sun shines all day long. So we are always outside. So outside is a thing that he knows. So for me, it was very bizarre that he wasn't going outside and he wasn't on the playground. And so this persisted and persisted. And when I engage in this conversation with him, and he goes, Worry tells me if I go outside, the kids won't want to play with me. They won't let me play on the, and he was very tiny for his age. Like, they won't let me play on the slides, or, you know, play on the playground. They're going to tell me that I'm strange because I speak funny. So he created these things in his mind. And I asked them, has anybody ever said any of these things to you? When he goes, no. I'm like, oh, okay. So, but Worry's telling you that this is the stuff that's going to happen. He goes, yes, very adamant. Okay, but has it happened? No. Have you been outside and played on the playground on the equipment before? Oh yeah, no, we have. At the end of the day, we do. He's happy to do it at the end of the day. I'm like, oh, okay. And nobody says anything to you? No. Are there kids on the playground? Yeah. Oh, okay. So what you're telling me is that Worry's lying to you. Is that right? Would you say he's lying? And he goes, yep. I'm like, do we listen to lies? Bring it back to what's real for them, right? And how we usually think and logic through a process. No, we don't listen to. Is it fair to listen to someone who's lying to you and stealing away from your fun and your time outside? You love being outside. You don't like being inside. It makes you feel yucky. And so then we get them onto that track of thinking, oh, hold on, there's life, there's possibility without worry present. And it's all in my power. I hope that's making sense. That's just one example. I can give other examples. And then also asking them, how do you know that worry is there? What gives you the clue that worry is there? You know, oh, it just pops into my head. Oh, okay. So it just comes and takes over without asking permission. Yep. Okay. Do we allow people into our personal space or anything into our personal space without permission? No. I wonder how we can make him go away, right? How we can catch him just beforehand. And you start brainstorming, even with silly things, right? Like I remember the one of the silly things that we did in the middle of the night, again, it was my son and he was younger. My husband and I had a trip to Canada to come and see before we moved, and we left the kids with my parents. So when he came back, for a little guy who was 3, it was too much, right? Having mom and dad gone for 10 days. How it manifested itself is that he would need to go to the bathroom like 300 times a day. I'm not even exaggerating. And so we, at first, of course, your mind goes, do we have a bladder infection? Is there a medical issue going on? No, there isn't. There was no other signs of anxiety but that. And eventually the one night, I don't know, it was like day 3 or 4, once we were back, I said to him, I said, oh, I think you know. So he said he's scared of having an accident. So, but you've never had an accident. And he goes, I know, but I keep thinking I'm going to have an accident. So I'd rather go to the bathroom. And I said to him, I think this is worry telling you that you're going to have an accident. I think you know that you're not going to have an accident because usually you just sleep through the night and you've never had a problem. And you've never had a problem at school. Is that right? And he goes, yep, that's right. I'm like, okay. So I think, where's worry anyway? Is he here right now with you? He must be, because he's woken you up. So he points to the beauty of 3-year-olds, right? So he points to some arbitrary place in the room. So I go, right. Do you think, we had 2 dogs then, I said to him, do you think Eva and Sophie, do you think it's scared of Eva and Sophie? Is worry ever around when Eva and Sophie are around? And then he goes, because remember he's 3, so I've got to kind of help him think along a little bit. And he goes, no. I'm like, okay. What about Dad? Is he ever around when Dad's around? He goes, no. I'm like, me? He goes, no, very scared of you. I'm like, oh, okay, great. So I'm just going to quickly get the dogs. So 2 o'clock in the morning, I wake up my husband, we bring the dog, we bring his sister, and we chase worry away. So we made this whole big dance and song, and I know it sounds quite extreme, but then he felt like, okay, worry's gone, because we made it tangible, we made it concrete, and then we chased it away. And so then we were lucky enough that was enough for that problem to go away. So of course, each situation requires a little bit more intensity in terms of what you need to do and for how long. Sometimes you need to keep at it for it to kind of solidify, right, and consolidate. So when we chase away worry, what would you like to have instead of worry? Because we often say, and it's not just worry, right? It's not just anxiety. With many of the emotions, like, oh no, you mustn't hit, you mustn't be, well, hitting when you're angry, right? Like you mustn't hit the pillow. No, don't be so angry. Well, I am angry. What am I supposed to be if I'm not angry? Like we need to give thought to that. So we need to get rid of angry. We need to externalize it. So let's hit the pillow rather instead of your sister, right? Because remember, with anxiety, it can present itself in an aggressive way, right? So let's get rid of the angry that anxiety is made for you. So let's hit the pillow, let's scream in the pillow, let's throw around a stuffy or whatever it is we need to do in a way that we're not harming ourselves or others. Now tell me, now that we're rid of it, what do you want to have instead? When it's gone, when you don't have to worry anymore about this, when worry is not coming to bug you, what emotion would you like to have instead? Sometimes with some kids, they'll just tell you, I just want calm. I just want to be happy. They love saying happy. But when they give you something like that, then make it tangible. What does happy look like for you? Because your happy and my happy are going to look different. Your happy for you might be 15 different flavors of ice cream in one bowl. Happy for me might be, I just want to go for a run, right? Very different. So what does your happy look like? And make it tangible. Happy looks like when we're playing board games, or happy looks like when we're watching a family movie, or when I get to run around in the rain, and when we get to play in the snow, whatever it is that makes happy for them. Or what does calm look like for you? So it's tangible. So they know what to look for when it's there, and you know what to notice when you see it in your child, because you often are going to see it before they do. And it's our job to identify it and verbalize it so that they understand that it's there, bring it to their attention, especially when they're very young. Actually, it doesn't matter what age they're at, because there's always some level of disconnect due to some emotional situation based on a developmental phase, right? So just bringing it to their attention is really important.
Before we continue, Sammy,
Yes.
I'm wondering, there are two questions here of people who are asking about kids at different age groups. I'm wondering if it would be okay to interrupt here, or if you want to finish this off before we.
Oh no, we can interrupt you. It's okay.
Okay, all right, because I'm really liking the process, and maybe we can sort of look at two real world examples.
Okay.
One is moving a family from one province to the other. In particular, it's a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, but the 16-year-old has a girlfriend. And this person is predicting that this is going to be a tough transition with the 16 and the 14-year-old.
It is. And so that's the reality.
Can you sort of go through those steps very
Steps.
quickly and sort of give some examples? And then I'm going to give you another one as well.
Okay. So with the moving, so it's a reality that's happening, right? So it's not that, and I think that's important. So giving them a wish, because I was hoping to apply this to this situation. So giving them a wish of going, it would be great if we didn't have to move. It would be amazing, because it's difficult. How do we say goodbye or be at a distance? Because you're not necessarily saying that this relationship must end, and that's not something we should be suggesting, but rather having a long distance relationship, especially at your age, is really, really difficult. At any age is really difficult. And I wish that this didn't have to be, but due to whatever the life circumstances are, this is the best thing that we can do for us at this point in time. And you have every right to feel what you're feeling. And we have to do this move. So what are some things we can put into place to make it more manageable for you, right? So hearing them out and I would have a brainstorming session of, although they're going to probably poo-poo most of your ideas, because what they want at 16 is what they want at 16, right? And now there is love involved, and it's, at that age, is really difficult to kind of rationalize it. So then I would engage in a brainstorming situation with them. Okay, so what could be viable for us to do in terms of you staying connected with your girlfriend? What are some of the ideas where you think it's manageable and sustainable? Have you guys thought about anything on how to move it forward? What do you think is the best for you? Do you want to continue? I'm assuming you want to continue this relationship, because you don't want to assume otherwise, because they'll get really angry with you, even if they've contemplated it. So you're going to assume that they want it. And is there something that you have reservations about? What are your fears? So I would want to know my child's fears around this. Like, they're going to meet someone else, this relationship is going to fall apart. Then I would look at the worst case scenario with them. Okay, worst case scenario, this relationship ends. What is your biggest fear there? Is it the fear of being alone? And going, okay, and then going through the steps of, do you think this worry is really real at this age? You found, if I'm just making an assumption, because of course I don't know your context. I hope I'm not completely off the mark in terms of, where we're at. But yeah, so I would want to know, at the end of it, it comes down to a fear of losing someone that they love and losing that connection. And what is the root of that fear? Because we all know that often, not always, I don't want to gross generalize, but relationships at that age are not life relationships, right? They're going to change. But at that age, when they're in it, they don't see anything else but that relationship. And it's just to guide and be open to guiding that process very slowly, and opening up the conversation and the safety net for them to discuss their fear, and then saying like, but I think worry is lying to you. Because what would worry be saying in a situation like that for anyone who's been in a romantic relationship that's ended? I'm going to end up alone. I'm never going to meet someone as nice as them. No one's going to love me like this person loves me. That this person makes me feel so great. No one in the world has ever made me feel like this. And it's going back to, no one had made you feel like this until this person, and you don't know yet who else might be able to make you feel like this, right? So bringing in the possibility of yet, right? And speaking to the child with the presupposition that they are going to be successful, right? When you arrive and when you are able to make new friends and when you make new connections, you will be making new friends, right? That could either give you the strength to continue with this long distance relationship, right? And you're able to make connections and maybe interact in different community activities, sporting activities, school activities, whatever it is, that can help you cope with the distance, and you guys can connect in this way, right? So bringing in the possibility of the wonderful things that are to come still, or pleasant things. Let's not even go as far as wonderful, because they're not going to be able to hear wonderful at this stage just yet. But it's not there yet, but we need to give it time. And what can we put into place to accelerate it for you, right? I don't know. I hope that answers that question.
Yep. And then the second one, so that one was a 16-year-old. And now we go down to the other end of the age scale. We go to a 2.5-year-old who is afraid of people with white beards.
Oh, goodness. Okay. That's very specific.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Okay. So then I know my mind goes straight into bringing in, which you've probably done, bringing in something that's pleasant with a white beard, which is typically, I'm thinking Santa, if that is something that the child is familiar with. Thinking of what is, or actually before that, I would want to know, what does scared tell you? Because that's not necessarily anxiety, but that's scared. That's a fear of something specific, right? So what does scared tell you when you see someone with a white beard? What does scared tell you is going to happen? What is so scary? Just find out what it tells them, right? And then it'll give you more insight and going, okay, well, is that real? Has that ever happened? There's these horrible things, right? And if they go, I don't know, if I don't know is the only thing that they're stuck with, then I would go with, is it possible that maybe people with white beards are just weird and not scary? You know, bringing it down a notch. If they're stuck in the world of I don't know. If they're not stuck in the world of I don't know, and they can actually give you tangible answers about what makes somebody with a white beard scary, then bringing it to, can you think of anything or anyone with a white beard that hasn't been terrifying, that hasn't been so bad even? Like, let's not go with fun, that hasn't been so bad. And actually maybe even kind of okay, you know? And then thinking of little garden gnomes, because they usually have white beards and they're cute. And, you know, like thinking about Smurfs, like the cartoon, and they've got like all the little characters that are kind of okay, and seeing like, okay, so actually maybe not everything with a white beard is terrifying or scary. Is it possible that scared is maybe manipulating you, you know, making, or it's 2.5-year-old, but like trying to convince you of what he's thinking instead of you thinking of what you're thinking and what you know to be true? And I would make it very, very concrete. Then I would make scared. So this will be this next step that we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to quickly put it up here, because I think this might be helpful, especially with little people, is that, so you know how we spoke about, let's speak about the white beard, right? So scared tells me that people with white beards are going to bite me, or they're going to steal me, I don't know, or they're mean and they're horrible, and they'll shout at me, and I'll go, okay, so that's what scared is telling you. And has every single person with a white beard shouted at you? Has anyone actually ever shouted at you that has had a white beard? Oh yes, this man one time, you know, because maybe the child has had a scary experience with someone with a white beard. So, and they're 2.5, right? You said it's very young.
2.5, yes.
2.5. Okay, so very, very young, but they can understand you, right? They can understand you. So, and they have limited vocabulary, but enough to communicate for you to go, okay, is Santa Claus, for example, scary? Is he bad? Just say bad. Is he bad? Is he going to just think bad things? No. Garden gnome or Smurfs, like watch a cartoon with Smurfs and see like, but he's funny. This is Papa Smurf. I think Papa Smurf has got a white beard. I can't remember. And one of them has, I can't remember the name now, you know, and he's so kind and he's this and da 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 da, right? And then allowing, and then it gets, if you can even get like a play white beard that you can just leave around and kind of mess around with, like on their stuffies, or like putting it upside down on your own head, not necessarily on your face where it's going to make the child scared, but like in weird and wonderful places. And making little arts and crafts with it so that it can be tangible for them because they're so little, for them to understand that it doesn't have to be one person might be mean that had white beard, or did something that scared you that had a white beard, but to take away that generalization, right? And then we're going to draw, let's call it Miss Scaredy Cat, right? That's telling you these things to be scared of, or then make a little scaredy cat or make it out of clay and and say that's scaredy cat. Scaredy cat is making you scared of Christmas. Is that fair? No, it's not fair. Who wants to be scared of Christmas? That's when you get presents. And we want Santa to bring presents to our house. Yes, yes. Santa will bring presents anyway. Doesn't that make him a really nice person? Because Santa brings presents anyway. You know, bringing it back down to something that they can understand, and put it in just reframing it for them and bringing in the possibility of niceness with that scariness, with the scary thought. So scared is telling you lies, basically. It's making you think what it thinks because it is scared of these things. You don't need to be scared of what scared is scared of, you know? And so what I do, and you could use any number of these things with worry or with scared, is that we make it an external form and then we destroy it. So it's a little bit on a destructive side, but it's such a nice relief for kids. So one of the most easiest ones, my house is full of balloons at all times. It's not environmentally friendly, I know, but it works. So when they are worried about something, we blow our worries into a balloon. And then our job is to not let this balloon touch the floor. So we hit it and we kick it and we write the worries on the worry thing. If they're little and 2.5, we just put the worries in the balloon. Sometimes I hold it like a boxing bag and they hit it, then we kick it, then they sit on it and they pop it, so it's gone, right? Slightly older children, we sometimes write all the worries on an airplane, a paper airplane, we make it, we write it on there, and then we throw it around and we smash it around, and then eventually it dissolves into water. We throw it like in a big bucket of water and we watch it go away and the ink kind of dissipates off the paper. Painting it on a wall in the summer and throwing water balloons at it, and watching it disappear. And as they're doing it, I often get the children to, might be a little bit, actually it'll be really cute with a 2.5-year-old with a limited level of vocabulary, but it might be a little bit more tricky. But for them to shout out things that they don't want worry to steal from them or scared to steal from them anymore. Like, is it right that worry is stealing away from your fun? You know, do you think it's okay that worry is stealing away from your playtime, playing outside, from opportunities to make friends because you're not going to go play outside in the playground, for you to not be comfortable when you're out in a park playing because you're scared of a man with white beard, you know, or of grandpas have white beards and grandpas are so nice, you know, anything that it is interfering with their lives, like it's stopping you from sleeping at night, it's stopping you from going upstairs by yourself, it's stealing your independence. Is it fair? No, it's not fair. I don't want you to steal my sleep. You're not allowed to take away my thoughts because it's thinking for you, right? Worry is thinking for you. You're no longer able to think for yourself. So we're separating it. So when you're in charge, remember our whole aim was to put the child back in charge and have in a sense of control. So we're using our resources to destroy worry or chase away worry through these externalizing, like really external tools, because we want the child to regain and use their brave, right? And put them in the driver's seat of, I always call, like if their name is Bradley, like who's driving the Bradley bus? Is Bradley driving the Bradley bus, or is worry or scared driving the Bradley bus? Okay, because when I watch Bradley drive the Bradley bus, Bradley's able to have fun. He giggles with his friends. He's able to say goodbye to mom and carry on playing. But when Bradley lets worry drive, then suddenly Bradley forgets how to play nicely. He ends up using bad words. Bradley let's worry bring his angry out, and you show it in a way that hurts yourself or other people, then that's not okay. So who do you want to be in control? No, I want to be in control. I think you're a much better bus driver too. So I think you should be driving the Bradley bus, right? So like bringing it back. So again, so this whole process is making them aware of worry and making it normal for them. Like everyone goes through a phase that they're worried about something. And this is not going to be the last time that you're going to be worried about something, but we can manage it in this way, right? And the whole point is to separate the child and the anxiety and empowering the child to gain control. So I always ask, who's in charge? You are worried. Who's in charge? You are angry. Who's in charge? You are stutter, for a child that stutters. Like in any scenarios, it really doesn't need to be just with anxiety that you can use this kind of approach. And like I mentioned, is it fair for worry to take away from your fun, sleep, thinking, enjoying your friends, from your time? No, it's not fair. Oh, okay, so can we please take our power back, right? How are we going to take our power back? Instead of giving into worry, I'm going to drive the bus, right? And share some of your coping strategies, because the chances are you've experienced something like this. So, for example, when I told you the example of my son with needing to reconnect with his group of friends, my anxiety elevated when I heard that story, because I have experienced that as a small child, like feeling like I don't belong in this group of friends anymore, and it being a very scary situation. Why does my anxiety peak? Because I don't want my child to feel what I felt. That was horrible, right? So, but I didn't have the skills then, and there wasn't so much talk about mental health with parents back in the day when I was his age. So now there is. Now I know. So I am not going to act like a hysterical mom. I'm going to swallow my anxiety, and then I'm going to talk to him. And let's come up with a plan. How can I give you power back? How can I help you find your power so that you can go tomorrow and reconnect and feel like you're on the right direction? I always think a holistic approach is the best approach. So including the other significant adults in the child or people in the child's life. So if worry is something that's interfering at the moment, and you find a strategy or a language, because this is kind of a new language of speaking. What do you want instead of worry? What can we do? How can we get your power back? Who's in charge? When do you feel like it's not there? And that kind of language needs to be shared with the adults in the child's life that are in close contact with them, so that you can create a sustainable approach. Otherwise, it'll work for a while and then it won't, right? So I call this the art of parenting. I don't know why I made this thing go round and round. Anyway, A is to acknowledge feelings and give it a name. Like we spoke about the 16-year-old young person who's going to be moving. I know you're feeling frustrated, you're angry, you're worried about us moving provinces, and acknowledging it and making it real. So I said reflect the wish or want. So give them in fantasy what they can't have in reality. It would be great if we didn't have to move. It does suck that you have to do this, and I wish we didn't. You don't have to go through this, but we have to due to our circumstances. But let's come up with a plan, right? So bringing it back to reality, but this move is going to happen. These are the things we can put into place for you to feel more comfortable in terms of having a long distance relationship. What are some ideas that you've been thinking about? So that they know that there is a plan, because the whole thing and a rule in our house is always like, there's always a plan to be made. You're never stuck. Okay, even in what seems to be a dire situation in our children, in a child's life or in a person's life, there's always a plan to be made. The plan might not be exactly as what you anticipated at the beginning, but there is a plan that we can make. So let's come up with a plan. So I even use it in ridiculous situations, which has got nothing to do with worry, but those morning morning getting dressed problems because they're not really in the mood. Like this morning, anyone have problems getting kids up for school this morning after a long weekend? Oh my word. And my kids love school, but this morning was a different story. So nothing fitted properly, all the clothes were uncomfortable, nothing matched, nothing was warm enough. They've suddenly outgrown every item in their cupboard. It was just, everything was a disaster. So I could have sat there and negotiated, which I did for a while, like giving them options. And eventually I was like, well, we got to leave in 30 minutes. You got to make a plan on how you're going to arrive at school, right? What's going to be on your body? Figure it out, because now you have options, right? There's a plan to be made. If that item is too small, find something that's more comfortable. If it doesn't match, something's got to give somewhere along the line, right? Either decide to be okay with your pants that are just this much too short for you, or be okay with having mismatched colors. But we got to make a plan. So that's something very simple, but that is the kind of like sewn into their way of thinking, that they know, Mom, I tried to make a plan and I did this and this, but it's not working. Okay, so you've been trying something. Let me come see what I can come up with, what plan we can make. So what makes it worse, but you guys all know this, blaming and accusing, right? So we know that that's just counterproductive. Denying your love or involvement. Like, if you're going to continue to behave in this way, well, then I can't interact with you or play with you. That is not going to be helpful. Saying, playing with you when you react in this way is really difficult. What do you need so that we can move forward playing in a way that we can both have fun, right? So what do you need is always a good thing. Comparing, we know comparisons are never really a useful strategy. Catastrophizing, so this is what I spoke about. So even when we feel like I felt about the friendship thing, a little catastrophe happening inside me, if I had to catastrophize, it wasn't going to be helpful. He was going to be more anxious, right? And giving it too much power or airtime. But let's come up with a plan. Let's come up with a strategy for tomorrow and see if it'll work. Although sharing our experiences and our coping strategies is very, very useful, just giving straight out advice, we're taking away from their power, right? So we want to give them a way of approaching to problem solve rather than just giving them a solution. It's not sustainable either. Minimizing the problem. Oh, don't worry about that. That's not such a big deal. We just moving down the road to another house. It's bigger, it's more beautiful. They don't care. They had their favorite spot in their old little house, right? And that's what they loved, and they're having trouble leaving that home. Okay, so it's a big deal for them. Colluding with anxiety, and I always use the kindergarten mom example, because our anxiety is high and we know our child's anxiety is high, and it's the first day of school and they're going to be away from us for an entire whole day. And so what do? We hang around. We hang around and we look through the window and we wait until the teachers eventually chase us off the ground. So that's colluding with anxiety, right? We always want to put our children, we want to assume success and ability, and we want to assume resilience. And how do our children become resilient? By expecting them to be resilient and putting them in a position where they can be resilient and show us that they can, and challenge the anxiety instead of feeling like, oh, they're not going to cope with that. It's going to cause too much anxiety. Of course, it will cause worry. Of course, it's going to be unpleasant. Some situations in life are unpleasant, but you know what? They've got lots in them to cope. I'm just going to highlight what they've got so they remember what they've got so they can cope, right? So just a recap, remember the art of parenting, which was acknowledge, give them what they want in fantasy, bringing them back to reality. Notice every single little improvement and verbalizing it. So this is, again, going back to acknowledging it, right? Because children themselves won't always notice, but we do. Acknowledge feelings, give what we spoke about this. It's kind of repetitive, I'm sorry. Prepare the child in a matter-of-fact kind of way, because they read off our cue. So I always give the example of mom and dad finally get, they deserved 2 hours away from kids to go have an uninterrupted meal. And then we tend to over-prepare our children for that couple of hours away, right? And that sometimes can bring on more anxiety than dealing with it in a very matter-of-fact kind of way. Yes, of course, they need some kind of a heads up, but they don't need a week advance and reminders every day to make sure that they're prepared for Saturday night. Instead of just telling them on Friday morning, right? that tomorrow night mom and dad are going to go out, have a dinner and have a date night because we haven't had time together and we need some adult time. And Sandy's coming to come look after you guys for 2 hours. And lucky you get to stay up 30 minutes later than usual because she's got some games planned. And when you wake up in the morning or in the middle of the night, I'll be home and you'll see me, kind of, even though you're anxious, even though it doesn't suddenly make it fun and the kid is not going to cry before you leave, but dealing with it and presenting it in a matter-of-fact way is setting them up for better success than over preparing them for a situation that they're not going to like anyway, right? Especially when they're very young. And that's that. I hope that made sense and was useful.
I think that was a really cool presentation, very dense, lots of information. Wow. So I'm just going to make an observation, Sammy, and you can comment on this if you want. Otherwise, I do have a couple of questions here in the chat box. Feel free to ask questions in the chat box. We still have about 10 minutes left to go here. So what I noticed, Sammy, is that it seems as if the parent immediately goes into the art of parenting, that two things happen. One is that you start empowering the child's anxiety reduces, but it sounds like the parent's anxiety also reduces.
Exactly. Well, that's the whole, that's the hope, right? The hope is to manage both our anxieties. Because when your child is anxious, you're going to be anxious because it's your child, right? So if I can remain calm, you can remain calm. Or if I can help you become calm, that will make me calm.
Yes. Yeah. Very cool. Okay, so one of our interested listeners is asking, can we apply these techniques that you've been mentioning to adolescents? And is there anything that we need to, sort of take note of or modify when we're communicating with an adolescent? I would even say a young adult. Is there anything that we would want to change a little bit?
It may be just the exercises in terms of, even the balloon exercise I do with adolescents because they love it. They think it's silly at first, and then it's just a good release for them. But in terms of the structure of questions, no, I keep it exactly the same, even with adults that I see sometimes. Or when I have interviews with parents, I use the exact same structure. So tell me about a time that you were without worry. What was helpful in that time? What would you like to do more of? What's not working? Because if it's not working, stop doing it, right? But if it's working, let's do more of it. What I would do with adolescents is I would remember that scaling exercise we did right at the beginning. I would scale with them. And if, let's say, they place themselves at a 2 or a 3 or a 4, it doesn't matter where they put themselves, right? But they're not at a 0, right? So then I would ask them, what is helping you be there? I want to know all the things that are helpful to help them be a 1 and not a 0, or help them be a 0 and not a -1. So what is it that is keeping you where you're at? Because those are resources. Those are things that are helpful. And out of these things, what has been the most helpful? And how have you been doing that? How have you been managing to keep yourself there? Then I would want to ask them, I wouldn't jump from a 5 to a 7 or a 5 to a 6 even. I would go baby steps and I go, what do you think you need? What change do you need to see to go from that 5 to a 5.5, right? So it's not what needs to get fixed, what must I do? Well, what do you need to start noticing to put you at a 5.5, or to allow you to know that you're starting to adjust, like to this new situation or, whatever.
Okay, so for a 4-year-old who's having difficulties doing new tasks or the first class, now they're mentioning the fact that after the first class, the 4-year-old starts having an easier time with it. And so they start to become, after a while, they start to become excited, calm, and engaged. So is there something that can help ease into the first class, into a new task? Or is this just something that's expected and that we just need to practice and give it some time?
You know what I would do, and what I've always done, is bring their attention, because if this is a pattern of their approach, their task approach, even though they're only 4 years old, I'd bring their attention to it because they have the cognition to understand that. To say, have you noticed, or I have noticed something, tell me if I'm right. Every time we're doing something new, you tend to not want to do it. You find it very difficult to get started. And every single time after you do it, you seem to be okay with it. And sometimes you even like it. Have you noticed it? They might be 4 years old, so they'll go, no, because they want to disagree with you. So then you remind them of a time where they actually had fun, where it was difficult for them, but they managed it despite of it being difficult. And they went and they did the first class despite it being difficult. Bring their attention to, and they go, oh, yes, I remember that, but it was because of this and this and this. But that's important, because my next question would have been, what helped you do that class? Go and do it, even though you were scared or even though you didn't want to. And if they're saying to you, oh, that's different because of this and this and this, well, those are the reasons, that's what they did to help them, right? And you use that in that new context. So you're doing front loading, but in a different way. You're doing it through noticing what their task approach is, right? And bringing their attention to it. And then bringing their attention to the fact that they've coped with this over and over again, and there's something there that's helped them. And hopefully they give you that through that conversation. And then, oh, I wonder what we can do with this so that when you start it, it feels kind of similar to that.
Yeah. So I think the next person is asking a two-part question. And I think to some degree you answered the first one with the white beard, but I'll put the first part of the question out, and then I'll also add in the second part of the question. So what if the worry that the child has is something that has actually happened in the past? For example, a child won't play with toys at school because other children have taken the toys away from them before. And then the second part of the question is, do you have any tips on helping kids stop pulling hair or picking nails or something like that?
Yeah. So the one with the played with toys, played with toys that other children have taken it away. Yeah, it's very similar to other situation. And I would also teach them a bit and role play assertiveness, because that is a skill that's probably missing, right? The child feels like they have to just give it away, or somehow the other children are able to overpower him or her. So I would role play assertiveness and how to stand your ground, because up until a certain point, it is very okay for you to be very assertive about, this is my personal space, and the words to use in practice to show a strong voice. I would actually role play that and make it very normal and okay for them to stand up for themselves, because it is quite a kind of sometimes feel very sorry for little ones in daycare and preschool, or even in kindergarten, because we're constantly going on and on about you must be kind and you must share. And developmentally, children are not actually ready to share before the age of 7. And we expect them to share from like 6 months old. And we're asking them to do something that they're not ready to do or understand, right? And that mutual reciprocity, oh my God, I'm losing my words, is not there, because it's not, I'm just giving, I'm not receiving anything in return, because my partner in crime is not sharing that experience, right? So we go on and on about kindness and sharing, and there is no room around assertiveness and standing up for yourself within a normal realm. Of course, we don't want to encourage aggression, but there needs to be some level of assertiveness that everybody has. So I would practice and role play, and I often role play that with little ones in my room, so that they feel empowered to be okay, right? And also display what's right and wrong way of being assertive, right? And then, sorry, what was the second question?
The second question is do you have any tips on helping kids stop pulling hair or picking nails, these kinds of behavior?
We got to give them something else to do instead, right? So they've developed whether it's the managing of anxiety or modulating, so that also goes to a bit of a sensory processing realm. If they're using that to calm and self-soothe, to find something else that would be less destructive for their bodies and less harmful for them. And I would maybe engage in conversation. So again, I would bring their attention to the fact that they do this. Do you realize that this is, I noticed that when your worry becomes more, or when your anxiety is elevated, depending on their age, this is what you resort to. And I get it, because it is calming. It is a calming, soothing thing to do, but it's hurting your fingers. It's making you bleed. Would you like to see it be different? Would it be okay? What do you think would give you similar kind of feedback or make you feel calm, but wouldn't hurt your body? So whether it is sometimes like putting a band on their wrist, like a soothing band that they can rub, or a stress ball that they can squeeze instead of like biting their nails, just something external, or a fidget. I mean, kids seem to love their fidgets and their puppets and that kind of thing, to substitute for kind of the body.
Okay. I just wanted to ask, because there is one more question. I just wanted to ask, how are you doing for time? Do you need to run away right at 8, or have you
No,
got
I'm
room for
okay.
about 5 more minutes?
I can hang out for 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes? Okay. All right. One more question. Whoa. All right. So this is going to be a long question. So son is having difficulties with anxiety when he feels ashamed or guilty after making a typical human error, and worrying it will cause an idealized person to become disappointed in them to the degree that this person might not like them anymore. He has difficulties coming forth with those apprehensions and letting on as to what that insecurity is, and how to solve it. So how can this individual encourage a child to go forth with expressing their vulnerability, which is something that all of us have difficulties with?
Oh, okay.
That's a big question.
It is a big question. And there's different ways of approaching it, right? So my brain jumps to a few places. So one would be, what is the worst case scenario? This person feels disappointed in me. Okay, and then what? Like I would kind of want to have like a, so what? They're disappointed. Like, have you been disappointed before? How did you recover from the disappointments? Kind of bringing it back to, these are feelings that are normal for people to feel disappointed by errors that other people make. And nobody wants to make mistakes. Nobody makes a mistake on purpose, usually, right? We're assuming the best about humans here. So typically speaking, people want to be at their best. Typically speaking, everybody wants to present themselves in the best light, especially to people that they care about. And we all make errors in doing that in different ways. So have you ever been disappointed? Tell me about a time where somebody you love disappointed you. What happened? How did you manage? How did you cope with that disappointment? What do you think of that person now? Have you forgiven them? What helped you forgive them? To bring it back so that the person that they're idolizing can come down to being human just like them.
Yeah.
Right? So I would put that perspective in, so that they can see it's normal and it's okay to make those sort of errors. And what would the alternative be? Is the alternative something completely realistic, to go through life not disappointing anyone that you care about? Like in what we know about life and what we've seen, depending on how old this individual is, of course, is that something realistic to expect of yourself? Because remember, we want to set ourselves up for success. Now, this mistake, what have you gained from it? Because every mistake gives us something, right? What is something that we've learned from this one? Okay. What do you think might make it better in the eyes of the person that you idolize? Maybe going back and giving some feedback, like owning it, right? Taking responsibility for our mistake instead of feeling shame, because feeling shame and feeling guilt is a natural reaction to when you've disappointed someone. Totally natural. So I wouldn't kind of dismiss that at all. I would acknowledge it. But it's not a helpful emotion. It's not helping with our situation. What can be more helpful? Acknowledging the mistake, right? So I always even say to my children, just own it, saying, yes, I did that. I don't even know why I did that, because I was just mad at my sister. So I just did it. Okay, I can deal with that. I can process that. But you standing there and saying, I didn't do it, or just crying, well, that's not helpful. Doesn't help anyone, right? She still walks away mad, and you're still standing there upset, and we haven't come to a resolve. But owning it and saying, I don't know, maybe because I was just frustrated, or I just didn't know another way, then the person that you're idolizing or you're disappointed can understand where you're coming from. Then the room for forgiveness and understanding, well, it's there, right? I would approach it from that. I don't know. I hope that answered your question or was helpful.
The person said, thank you very much. Yes.
You're welcome.
Okay, so just wanted to let people know that if you're having some difficulties with your kids, you know where to go. It's right there, www.yourpreferredfuture.ca or sammy@gmail.com. And also remember, one last thing is, if you are looking for a psychologist, or if you know somebody who is looking for a psychologist, please contact the Psychologists Association, where we have a directory, and it's free for you to go take a look through this directory. So I want to send a big thank you out to Sammy. Really a lot of information. My head is swimming a little bit right now. And so if you, I really want to say thank you very much. And Sammy, I'm seeing lots of love coming your way from
Thank you.
all the participants here. They absolutely loved your presentation. So thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Thank you, everyone, for coming and listening to me go on and on for a very long time. Thank you.